I wasn't prepared for how quiet the forest would be. The rental car stopped a mile from the gate, the road too broken to risk driving farther. From there, I had to walk, each step sinking into damp earth, pine needles clinging to my boots. The air smelled like rain and old metal, a scent I remembered too well. Red Pines Camp had always carried it, even when I was 11 and my brother Noah still laughed easily. Now the place looked fossilized in time. The camp gate sagged open, the red paint nearly stripped away. I stood there longer than I should have, fingers resting on the cold iron, waiting for some part of me to turn back. But I'd made a promise years ago. If I ever found the truth about Noah, I'd follow it all the way. Even here, especially here. Inside, the camp felt disturbingly intact. The dining hall windows were dusty but unbroken. The flagpole still leaned at the same angle I remembered. A line of cabins sat in the clearing like obedient children, their doors shut tight, their roofs bowed under decades of debris. But something felt wrong immediately. A plastic cup lay on a picnic table, clean, standing upright, no dust gathered inside. A green jacket hung from the railing of cabin 3, the fabric fluttering slightly as if recently touched. And near the fire pit, someone had stacked kindling into a neat, fresh triangle. It looked prepared. I tried telling myself the rangers must have come through recently, but the pit in my stomach didn't believe it. I lifted my camera, filming everything. "Red Pines," I said softly, my voice thinner than I intended. "Closed 18 years ago after the disappearance of several campers, including my brother. I'm here to document what happened." My words faded into the trees. The wind shifted, brushing the tops of the cabins, and something like a whisper threaded through the branches. Not quite a voice, just enough to make my skin pebble. I stepped onto the porch of cabin 7, Noah's old cabin. The door was stuck, swollen with age. When I finally shoved it open, a wave of cold air slid past me, like the room exhaled after holding its breath. Inside, dust coated everything except one bunk. The mattress was smoothed out, the blanket folded. A small wooden toy one Noah used to carve stood on the pillow. I froze. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Someone had been here, recently, and they wanted me to know. The next morning, I woke to the sound of something brushing against the outside wall. Slow, deliberate, like a fingertip dragging across wooden boards. For a moment, I just lay there in my sleeping bag, heart thudding, listening. The sound stopped the moment I sat up. Silence rushed in, thick and cold. I unzipped the bag, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying that same metallic scent I'd noticed yesterday. Dew clung to the grass like tiny beads of glass. But what stopped me wasn't the cold or the quiet. It was the footprints. Small, bare. Dozens of them pressed into the wet earth around cabin 7. They ran in circles, scattered like children playing tag, then veered off toward cabin 4. They were fresh. The edges were still sharp, not softened by time or wind. No one should have been here. No kids, no tour, no life at all. I followed the tracks to cabin 4, pulse hammering. The footprints stopped right at the door. My hand hovered over the knob before I forced myself to push it open. Cabin 4 smelled of damp wood and something sweeter beneath it, like old crayons melted by the sun. Dust coated most of the room, but near the far wall, patterns had been wiped clean by small hands. Drawings covered the surface. Crayon figures of campers lined up in front of the lake, the cabins, the counselors, all of them smiling, except the shadows behind them. Every drawing had the same wrongness. Tall, misshapen silhouettes lurking behind the children, their heads tilted, their arms too long. Watching. One drawing hung crookedly from a nail. When I straightened it, my stomach dropped. 2 kids stood side by side, their names scribbled beneath them. No, just the date in the corner was today's. My breath caught. I stepped back too quickly and knocked my shoulder against a bunk. Something slid off the mattress and hit the floor with a soft thud. A backpack, blue, faded. the zipper decorated with a tiny plastic rocket ship. I recognized it instantly. It belonged to Matthew Keene, the boy who vanished the same night Noah did. I remembered his mother holding it during interviews, begging for answers no one ever gave. The backpack shouldn't be here. I crouched to pick it up. It felt heavier than I expected. Inside were a few things: a broken compass, a small notebook, a flashlight with corroded batteries, and a Polaroid photo. My hands shook as I pulled it free. 4 kids stood in front of cabin 7, squinting into the sun. Noah was on the left, grinning widely, his arm thrown around my shoulders. Matthew stood beside him. Behind them, barely visible, was a shape in the tree line, like someone standing too still to be human. What made my blood run cold wasn't the shadow. It was the edge of the photo. Someone had torn the picture in half. The missing part was where my face should have been. A crack echoed outside, sharp, splintering. I whipped around, heart climbing into my throat. The noise came from the tree line, the same place the shadow in the photo had stood. I aimed my flashlight at the trees. Something moved between them. Quick, child-sized. But the way it slipped behind the trunks wasn't natural. Too smooth, too quiet, like it floated instead of stepped. "Hello!" I called out, though my voice betrayed every fear tightening my chest. No answer. Then, from deep among the pines, came a small voice, soft, breathy, and unmistakably childlike. "Jess, don't look at the trees." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that whisper again, thin as breath, trembling like a warning. Don't look at the trees. By midnight, the camp had fallen into a stillness so complete it felt staged, like the world was holding itself perfectly still. I stayed inside cabin 7 with my back against the wall, flashlight gripped tight, waiting for something, footsteps, voices, anything to break the silence. It didn't take long. Around 1 a.m., a soft creak sounded on the porch, then another. Slow, hesitant, almost curious. My breath locked in my chest. The flashlight beam trembled in my hands. 3 knocks tapped against the door. Light. Polite, childlike. "Noah!" The name slipped out before I could stop it, raw and barely audible. I stood, forcing myself toward the door, every instinct screaming not to open it. When I did, the hinges groaned loudly, and cold air swept in, brushing over my clothes like fingers. No one was there. But the wooden plank right in front of me sagged under the weight of something invisible, something still standing on it. I froze. The board creaked again, then sprang back as if released. Whatever had been there slipped away. A soft object touched my foot. I nearly screamed before realizing what it was, a piece of folded paper. I bent down with shaking hands and unfolded it. A child's drawing. 2 figures, me and Noah, standing in front of the camp sign. But the forest behind us wasn't a forest at all. It was a cluster of tall, bent silhouettes, their heads bowed toward us. And on my drawn figure, a red X crossed out the eyes. My throat tightened. I backed into the cabin, locking the door. But as I turned, something flickered outside the window, movement, quick and unmistakable. A small figure stood between the cabins, half hidden in darkness. The outline looked like a child, but the posture was wrong. Shoulders slightly raised, head tilted too far, as if listening to sounds I couldn't hear. I raised my flashlight. The beam landed on the figure, then stuttered, cutting to darkness for half a second. When the light steadied again, the figure had shifted several feet to the left. Not walked, shifted, like reality had skipped forward. A cold prickle crawled up my spine. "Who are you?" I whispered. The figure slowly mimicked the tilt of my head, copying me with a half-second delay. The same eerie imitation as before. I shut the blinds and backed away. I didn't realize I was crying until my breath hitched. I felt watched, studied, like something out there was learning me piece by piece. That was when I heard it again. Step, step, step. Small footsteps circling the cabin. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying not to breathe too loudly. The steps stopped near the window. Then came a low scrape along the glass, as if a tiny hand were tracing its way across the pane. Seconds stretched. Then a voice, right outside, whispering through the thin wall between us. "Jess, why did you come back?" I stumbled away from the window, knocking over my camera. The screen flickered, then lit up, showing the feed it had recorded earlier in the day. Cabin 7, Noah's old bunk, empty. But as the clip played, something new appeared, something that hadn't been there before. A small shape in the corner of the frame. A child-sized silhouette facing the wall, slowly turning its head toward the camera, though there was no face to turn. The feed cut to static. Outside, the footsteps resumed, now running. Laughing, multiple voices, multiple children, circling the cabin, faster, closer. And every laugh sounded like it came from a mouth that wasn't used to laughing anymore. I waited until sunrise before stepping outside. The laughter had stopped sometime after 3, fading all at once, as if the children had been yanked away by something impatient. By dawn, the camp looked harmless again, washed in pale gold light, almost peaceful. But the footprints remained. They crisscrossed the dirt between cabins, looping and weaving like frantic chalk lines. Some were so small I couldn't imagine a child that tiny even walking upright. Others overlapped, forming spirals that made me dizzy just looking at them. I forced myself toward the old infirmary. If anything in this camp held answers, it would be there. My legs felt heavy, each step an argument with fear, but something deeper pushed me forward. A thread tied tight around the memory of Noah's smile. The infirmary door hung crookedly, one hinge snapped, the other rusted into a permanent half-open gape. Inside, dust floated in soft beams of sunlight. Cabinets stood ajar, their contents long decayed. A few metal cots lined the walls, sheets stiff with age. On the far counter lay a thick, water-warped book. A logbook. My pulse spiked. Pages clung together, fused by moisture and time, but I peeled them apart carefully. The early entries were routine, scraped knees, mild fevers, sunburns. Then the tone shifted. Day 9. Children claim to hear voices at night. They say someone is calling their names from the tree line. Day 12. 4 campers refused to leave their bunks. Said the shadows in the room moved wrong. Day 14. Matthew Keene missing for 2 hours. Found near the lake staring into the water. Couldn't explain why he'd gone there. My stomach twisted. Day 15. Noah Harlow, the ink smudged across the page. I held it closer to the light. Said he met a friend in the woods. Says he looks like me but not me. My breath hitched. The following pages were worse. Erratic handwriting, frantic underlines, whole lines crossed out. One entry was written entirely in shaky block letters. They come back different. Not sick, not possessed, something else. Another, they don't blink. They don't cast shadows unless the trees do. They mimic, but only after they watch long enough. I felt a cold sweat crawl down my spine. Further in, a page had been folded tightly, as if the writer had panicked and hid it. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. Day 16. Noah disappeared at 2:17 a.m. cabin door open. Tracks leading into the woods. Small footprints. Larger ones beside them twisted, wrong like the bones inside weren't arranged right. My vision blurred. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep reading. Day 16, later. Children gathered by the fire pit without being called. All silent, all facing the woods. Something stood behind them. Tall, long-limbed, watching me. When I blinked, it was gone. The final entry was a smear of frantic strokes. The camp doesn't let them leave. It keeps them. It learns THEM. I hear it calling me now. A chill tightened around my ribs, squeezing. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly. A soft thud echoed behind me, like a bare foot hitting linoleum. I turned slowly. Nothing, just the empty room. But in the dust on the floor, fresh tracks appeared, small, forming one by one, moving toward me though no child stood there. I backed against the counter, heart slamming. The invisible steps stopped inches from my boots. Then a whisper brushed the air near my ear, warm, close, unmistakably a child's voice. "Don't read anymore, Jess." He doesn't want you to know. I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I heard someone whispering my name from the doorway of the cabin, soft, careful, almost hopeful. When I finally sat up, heart racing, nothing was there. Just the empty frame and the trees beyond, still as stone. By morning, the air felt wrong. Heavy, charged, like the camp itself was holding its breath. I packed what little I'd brought and stepped outside, deciding I had to reach the ranger station, no matter what waited along the way. Staying here meant letting those voices get closer. The forest path was mushy from last night's rain, swallowing my boots in cold mud. The wind kept shifting, carrying faint echoes of laughter, kids laughing, high and bright, the way they must have sounded before the fire. It made my stomach twist. Nothing joyful should still remain here. I was halfway down the hill when I heard footsteps behind me. Light, barely there, I froze. "Lily," a girl's voice called. I felt the world tilt. That wasn't my name. I didn't answer. "Lily, wait, it hurts." Another voice layered under it, a boy's, shaky and small. I forced my legs to move. Shadows flickered between the pines. Something followed me, too smooth, too quiet for anything human. I didn't know how I knew, but I felt it. It wasn't imitating kids out of confusion. It did it because it wanted me to slow down. The trail narrowed, branches clawing my sleeves. A branch snapped hard behind me. "Please don't run from us," a new voice said, this time deeper, older. A man. It sounded like the ranger I met the first night. Except off, hollowed out. I broke into a full sprint. The trees blurred, my lungs burned. Every instinct screamed that if it caught me, if it touched me, it would wear my voice next. When the roofs of the old cabins came back into view, my hope shriveled. I'd looped around. The forest had turned me without my noticing. The thing had driven me straight back to the heart of the camp. I stumbled into the clearing, gasping. The main lodge towered before me, blackened. Its roof collapsed long ago. Smoke, real or imagined, drifted from it like a memory still burning. The voices quieted. Then, from inside the lodge, someone let out a single, ragged exhale. I stepped backward. A figure climbed out through the broken doorway. It was shaped like a person, tall, thin, but its arms hung too long, like wet rope. Its skin looked bubbled, scorched, melted into itself. But what froze me wasn't its body. It had no face, just a smooth, cracked surface, until holes pushed through the skin like soft clay, forming a mouth that stretched wide. "Lily," it croaked, wrong, distorted, like multiple voices jammed together. My breath caught. It knew I wasn't Lily, but it also knew I was alone. And it was hungry for someone new to wear. I don't remember deciding to run. One moment I was staring at that faceless thing as it pulled itself through the burned doorway, and the next I was tearing across the clearing, lungs scraping raw air. The creature didn't sprint. It didn't need to. Its movements were slow but deliberate, as if it knew exactly how this would end. The lodge loomed behind me, charred beams jutting out like broken ribs. I didn't want to go inside. Every part of me screamed not to, but the forest was worse. The thing moved silently through the trees, around me, ahead of me. I couldn't tell where it really was. The voices tangled through the branches, layering, merging, like dozens of half-remembered people breathing down my neck. When I collided with the lodge's entrance, splinters cut into my hands. The inside was dim, lit only by the gray morning leaking through the holes in the roof. Ash covered the floor in soft drifts, rising when I stepped and clinging to my throat with the taste of old smoke. The smell, burned wood, scorched plastic, something sweet and rotten, was suffocating. Behind me, the forest fell silent. I heard the crunch of something stepping onto the charred threshold. I ducked behind a fallen beam and crouched, pressing my face into my knees to muffle my breathing. My whole body trembled so hard the ash around me shifted. A small voice whispered inches from my ear. "Lily didn't hide." My blood ran cold. I whipped my head around, but no one was there. Just the half-collapsed bunk beds, their frames twisted by heat. I crawled deeper, forcing myself into the narrow crawl space between two beams. The air was thicker here, stale and warm, like the building was exhaling around me. The creature moved inside. Its footsteps were impossibly soft, more like something sliding than walking. Occasionally they stopped completely, and the absence of sound was worse. I realized with creeping horror that it was listening for me. My pulse hammered so loudly I felt sure it could hear it. A long, dragging breath filled the lodge. Then another. Then more, multiple lungs pulling in air at once. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Something brushed the floor near my hiding place, fingertips. They made a faint tapping sound as they traced the charred wood. Slow, searching. My vision blurred with panic. Suddenly, a heavy beam above me creaked, settling with a groan. Dust drifted down. I flinched, just a tiny movement, but enough. The tapping stopped. A dozen voices whispered together. "There you are." I scrambled out from the crawl space, slipping in the ash as I bolted for the back of the building. Behind me, the creature lunged. Its limbs made wet cracking sounds as they stretched, reaching farther than they should. A hand, if it could be called a hand, slammed the floor inches behind me, leaving a dent in the weak wood. The back wall of the lodge had a hole burned straight through it, leading into another dark room. I dove through, hitting the ground shoulder first. Pain shot through me, but I didn't stop. I crawled across the debris until I reached the far wall, what was left of the old infirmary. Burned cots lined the walls, their metal frames warped. A melted IV bag hung from a hook like a deflated organ. The air had a different smell here, sharper, chemical, lingering after all these years. And then I saw it. A narrow hatch in the floor, blackened but still intact. A basement door. I hesitated. Going down felt like sealing myself in a grave, but the voices were getting closer, crawling through the building, laughing now. With shaking hands, I pulled the hatch open. Darkness yawned below. I couldn't see the bottom. I dropped my flashlight down. It clattered loudly, bouncing from wall to wall, then hit something soft with a dull thud. I didn't want to know what. The creature entered the room, no more deciding. I slipped into the hatch and lowered the door above me, just as something long and pale slid through the doorway. The hatch clicked shut, trapping me in absolute darkness. The lodge creaked. The voices above shifted, moving toward the hatch. And then the thing began to knock, one slow tap at a time, as if asking to be let in. The darkness below the lodge wasn't empty. The air was thick and heavy, like water pressing in from all sides. My flashlight had fallen and broken somewhere in the hatch, so I felt my way along the cold concrete wall, fingers tracing the damp, mossy surface. Every step echoed, a hollow thump that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. The basement stretched farther than I imagined, long, narrow corridors lined with rusted metal lockers and overturned furniture. The smell hit me then. Old smoke, wet earth, and something sweet, like candy rotting in the rain. I gagged, forcing myself onward. Voices came, distant at first, whispering my name. "Jess, Jess, come here," they weren't all children. Some were deeper, strained, layered, wrong. They wrapped around me, pressing into my chest, pulling at my mind. I found the center of the basement, an open space where the floor had collapsed, revealing a pit below. From the edge, I could see shapes moving in the shadows, flickering like smoke. They weren't human, though they bore faces, distorted, hollow, sometimes familiar. And there, in the middle, a figure stood. Small at first, like a child. But as I focused, it stretched impossibly upward, limbs long and bending in unnatural angles. Its head turned slowly, showing a smooth, featureless face. Then I heard it, Noah, his voice, clear, soft, calling me. "Jess, come closer." "Don't be afraid." I froze. My chest ached and tears burned my eyes. It couldn't be him, I knew it. But the way it spoke, the way it remembered, the way it knew my heart betrayed me. I stepped forward, drawn by a mixture of hope and terror. The thing, or whatever had taken him, reacted. Its body shivered and the air warped around it, like heat above asphalt. Shadows stretched along the walls, reaching toward me. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the pit. "Jess," the voice whispered again, now layered with hundreds of others. "Stay with us, you're part of it now." I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My feet were frozen, my hands trembling as the pit seemed to breathe, exhaling a cold wind that smelled like earth and smoke and something alive. Shapes rose from its depths. Children, all of them, their faces pale and empty. Some had Noah's features, others unknown, all watching, waiting. I tried to step back, but the floor under me groaned and shifted. The shadows crept closer, folding into themselves like smoke. One reached out, impossibly long fingers brushing my shoulder. Cold, wet, familiar. "Jess," the voice pleaded again. And then, in perfect clarity, "You wanted the truth, now it's yours." I felt myself pulled forward. My feet left the ground. The pit yawned beneath me, dark, bottomless. I struggled, clawing at the concrete edge, but it was useless. The last thing I saw was Noah's face, or what used to be Noah, smiling, stretching impossibly as it reached for me. And then darkness swallowed me. The lodge stood silent above. No footprints, no voices. No one had entered or left. Only the wind whispered through the pines, carrying a faint, indistinguishable laugh. Red pines had claimed another. And somewhere, deep in the woods, the voices began calling a new name.